Hello, everybody. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Travelers Championship Initial Research Show. To begin the show, happy Father's Day to all of the dads out there, especially mine. Happy Father's Day, Pop's Call, who had a good sweat going into this Sunday in a tiers contest, was leading that contest, and then Sunday happened. But it was still a successful day for him in terms of that tiers contest. And then the other shout out for the evening is to my friend Dave, who had the top 10 on Harris English. So congratulations to you both on your successful weekends. And if you had success at the 2023 US Open, jump in chat, let me know, or put it in the comments, reach out to me on social media. Would love to be able to shout out everybody at the community or in the community who had success this week. For me, it was a step backwards. Had a few things right. I mentioned that I was pretty high on Harris English, was going to play a lot of Xander, mentioned Rory, all of that good stuff, but I may have also mentioned that I was higher on Adam Scott than I was on Ricky Fowler. Can't win them all. But it was a little bit of a step backwards for me. So we're going to try to right the ship this week for another designated event on the PGA Tour. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler and a much better DFS player. Go check them out. It's simply well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to a lot of social media. First off, my Twitter and Instagram, where tomorrow I will be posting some research around TPC River Highlands and the Travelers Championship, the former winners here. So if you would like to see the research that I do on the PGA Tour every week, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. Twitter is also where I post my betting cards every week for the PGA Tour. So if you would like to see my betting card, give me a follow over on Twitter. And then lastly, Twitter is also where I do my baseball content daily, 3 up, 3 down, 3 players who I think will accrue their value, 3 players who I don't. It's turning into kind of an every other day type of deal, especially since in the summer I get pretty busy with baseball season of my own and PGA content. So not every day, but if you would like to see daily or when I do baseball content, I post it to Twitter. So if you would like to see those players that I think are good for that day and not good for that day, give me a follow over at Twitter. And then lastly, for the social media part, Gabe's Twitter is also now in the description. He writes an article called The Fringe. It's a very, very good read, a great way to start your week. We've been collaborating for the past couple of months, and we've had a lot of success, off weeks here and there, but I've been building momentum this week notwithstanding, so not really, I don't see it as a coincidence when you have 2 analytic minds working together. So I highly suggest you go give Gabe a follow and subscribe to his article, The Fringe. You won't regret it. It really is a great way to start your week. Then finally, for this intro, we are live. Chat's open. How did you fare for the US Open? What did you think of LA Country Club in general as a spectator to the US Open? I certainly have my opinions to it. Would love to hear your alls. And then what are you thinking for early on this week for TPC River Highlands and the Travelers Championship? Being another designated event, a big name field is here. Who are your early favorites to play well this week at TPC River Highlands? So would love to hear from you all in chat. So let's do our initial research for the 2023 Travelers Championship. And we're going to start, as we always do, on a Sunday evening over at the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet. Good evening, Joey. Thanks for jumping in chat. How was your US Open? Were you successful? What'd you think of it? Oh, goodness, there goes my lid. What'd you think of it as a spectator? And happy Father's Day to you. But thanks for jumping in chat. We are in Cromwell, Connecticut at TPC River Highlands. I know it's getting just a bit cut off, but I did try to zoom in a little bit more for you all at this portion of the show. Hopefully it's a little bit easier to read. But we are in Cromwell, Connecticut, TBC River Highlands. It is a par 70 and a change, seemingly from the past probably couple of months, as this is a very, very short course. 6,852 yards is the official yardage on the scorecard. So we will be looking at short course metrics throughout this week. Something else that we will be able to look at, we are on a Pete Dye design. Now, it was renovated by Bobby Weed in 1989, but there are certain distinct features at TBC River Highlands that you will be able to say, yes, this is a Pete Dye design. So we already, off the bat, have two filters that we'll be able to look at different metrics throughout the week in short courses and in Architect. The greens at TBC River Highlands akin to a lot of Pete Dye designs. They are small, 5,000 square feet. Now, the difference here, as opposed to a place like Harbortown or the Stadium course, there's not a lot of slope or undulation in these greens. It is actually fairly flat, with the exception of you have some tiered greens and maybe some crowning, where if you are not in the middle of the green, the ball will roll off. But not a whole lot of undulation or slope actually on the greens. So a little bit of a distinct feature for TBC River Highlands in that regard. But certainly Pete Dye designs generally have small greens. So we are looking at some small greens, not a whole lot of fairway, and you'll see a whole lot of rough, 110 acres of rough, which I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. The rough generally measures to 4 inches and plus. Now, that is not as deep as it was from LA Country Club, but it's certainly comparable. This has always been some of the longest rough on tour. It'll look a whole lot, it'll look similar to LA Country Club in the sense that it is bluegrass and fescue. The greens are bent and Poa annua. So we have a few courses that we'll be able to take a look at. Most recently was Oakdale for the Canadian Open. We have Detroit Golf Club, host of the Rocket Mortgage. Silverado, which is the host of the Fortinet, used to be the Safeway. There's one other that's escaping me at the moment. Rocket Mortgage, maybe? I think that might be it. But we will be looking at bent and Poa annua greens this week in terms of surface. And bent Poa annua is throughout the course. Fairways, approaches, collars, everything except for the rough. So there's a look at TBC River Highlands from a GCSA tournament standpoint, or tournament fact sheet standpoint. Very short course, 6,852 yards. Pete Dye design. We are on small greens, a lot of rough. There are 5 holes with water in play, and bent Poa annua greens. So we will close that out. We're going to move to Fantasy National. And before I get into it, there have been 4 names that have withdrawn from the field already since the field came out on Friday. So those 4 players, Taylor Montgomery, Alex Noren, Aaron Wise, and Dylan Fratelli, are not in the field this week. So as we move through this evening, I will try to remember that for you, going through a few of these rankings. But those 4 names, those 4 players are not playing this week after originally committing to the Travelers Championship. Of course, the U.S. Open statistics will not be in here if we even get them. We saw there have been years where we get very little data. But your top players so far this calendar year committed to playing in the 2023 Travelers: Scotty Scheffler, John Rahm, Xander, Patrick Cantlay, your U.S. Open champion Wyndham Clark, Ricky Fowler, Victor Hovland, J-Day, Tony Finau, Max Homa. I mean, a designated event, so the best of the best are here again this week across the country in Connecticut. A couple of different things we can absolutely look at. I'm definitely going to have to move the timeline to look at a few of these filters. But one thing that we definitely saw, the course is short. It doesn't even come close to 7,000 yards, let alone 7,200. So going back to the beginning of 2021, our top performers on short courses in the field this week: Patrick Cantlay, Russell Henley, Seamus Power, Xander, Jon Rahm, Sungjae, Corey Connors, Scotty Scheffler, Hideki, Victor Hovland, and Matt Fitzpatrick. And also, we saw in the GCSAA tournament fact sheet, this is a Pete Dye design. So our top Pete Dye total performers, or total performers on Pete Dye courses in the past 2+ years, 2.5 years or so: Sungjae, Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cantlay, Brian Harman, Corey Connors, Xander, Shane Lowry, Matt Fitzpatrick, Tony Finau, and Collin Morikawa. So there's a few top 10s to kind of get an idea of some generalities. Players who play short courses well, players who play Pete Dye courses well, all of that kind of stuff. But for the first time in seemingly a month, we are on a course that we have some significant amount of history with. So let's go to the course breakdown in Fantasy National. And the first thing I like to do is go to the 9th and 10th most difficult hole, try to find where par is. So you see the 10th most difficult hole is exactly par. That would signify that it is slightly on the more difficult end, but would rate out to average. You see the toughest hole plays to almost 2/10. So you have 4 holes in between 1/10 and 2/10. You have 1800ths and 1100ths. Let's see, the 5th is 700ths. So you have a few holes here that play slightly over par, quite a few of them. But you also have a couple of holes that play pretty darn easy. The 18th plays to 3 full tenths of a shot under par. Now, it's not a great eagle opportunity, but it is a very, very good birdie opportunity. The other par 5 on the back 9 is the more eagle chance, or more eagleable hole, if that's a word. But it plays to just under a quarter of a shot under par. Few holes that play anywhere in between 1/10 and 1500ths. Story here is that this is about an average rated tournament and course in terms of difficulty. You've got a few holes that will come up and throw in a bogey, maybe even a double. But you have a few holes that present good birdie opportunities as well. So there's a look at the scorecard. As we move to the strokes gained by shot type per round, we see that short game is actually slightly higher than ball striking for TPC River Highlands. All of that is due to the putting, as you see here. Putting outweighing the approach for your top 10s. Off the tee is outweighing the around the green. It's pretty darn close, but short game slightly leaning or favored over ball striking for your top 10s. Move to the top 5s. You see the putting really kind of starts to take off and distance itself from the approach, but at the same time, off the tee starts to distance itself from around the green. And then for your winners, as you would expect, putting is a big deal, but this is far outweighing the approach in the sense that we are going to want to put a lot of emphasis on good bent and Poa Annua putters this week. As you can see, the heavy emphasis in putting. Now, the off the tee is garnering a lot of weight, especially considering against around the green. The approach is actually fairly mitigated, which is surprising considering Pete Dye generally emphasizes approach shots. But at least here at TPC River Highlands, for a consistent amount of your top 10, the approach has been fairly mitigated. It's been a lot about putting, and off the tee is slightly gained throughout the top 10 of the leaderboard. We move to strokes gained by hole by par. Again, with only 2 par 5s, you would expect the par 3s and 4s to carry the weight in terms of the importance. Not for your top 10s. The par 5s are almost at 2/10, almost doubling their par 3s. You move to the top 5s, the par 4s really start to catch up, but the par 3s lag behind, which is surprising to me. But there's the data for it. Now, this part doesn't surprise me. The par 4s will start to gain a lot of importance, especially since there are 12 of them here at TPC River Highlands. And then for your winners, par 5s and par 4s, par 3s start to maybe try to catch up a little bit, but pretty consistent distribution among your winners, top 5s and top 10s in terms of par 5, 4, and 3 scoring between them. All right, we move now to the whole composition chart, and you don't have to look at an ugly spreadsheet or Microsoft Excel spreadsheet since we have some data here. The 4 par 3s are equally distributed between 150 and 225, 2 from 150 to 175, 2 from 200 to 225. So you don't have 2 in the middle there, the 175 to 200. You have 2 short and 2 long par 3s, but nothing brutal like the LACC 280 plus par 3s. So 2 short and 2 long par 3s. The par 4s, I will say 1 is drivable, 1 is semi-drivable. It takes a whole lot of risk into play. Generally, players lay up, but you do have 2 short par 4s from 0 to 350. You have the 341 yard second. You see it only yields an eagle 0.2%. It's a decent birdie chance, but it's not really a drivable par 4 per se. Now, the drivable par 4 is the 15th, which only measures to 296. You see the eagle rate on that one is 1.5%. So the fully drivable par 4 is the 15th. You may get some circumstances, wind and course conditions, and the biggest of hitters that might go for this green in 2, or go for this green off the tee, the par 4 second. But generally it is just a short par 4 that has wedge in your hand. But the majority of the holes at TPC River Highlands, as you see, are par 4s, 400 to 450 yards, 8 of your 12. 75% of your par 4s fall into this range here. So when we go through Microsoft Excel a little bit tonight, and especially tomorrow in the data dive, and look at prior leaderboards, we'll see if this is a major factor. My guess is it's going to be. We're going to see how much of a factor it is. But 400 to 450 yard par 4s. You do have 2 long par 4s, 450 to 5. Then your par 5s, 1 each from 500 to 550 and 550 to 6. So there's a look at the whole composition, and because we have a whole composition, we don't have to go to Excel and do an estimated proximity per Pro Visualizer. You see the overwhelming majority of approach shots here at TPC River Highlands come from 150 to 175. In fact, 25% of them come from 150 to 175. Again, another kind of staple of Pete Dye designs, in the sense that it's not a bomber's course. Bombers aren't excluded from winning here. They can, but a lot of times you have forced layups that will still put a medium length iron into your hand for your approach shots. You do have a fair amount that come from 125 to 150, and even a few amount from 200 plus. These are your par fives, your longer par fours, but the majority, and we'll really scrutinize this tomorrow, is from 150 to 175. So we'll see if this is the leading proximity that we want to focus on this week. Historic cut line at the Travelers. For the past couple of years, it's been at -1. Again, that is right on average for the PGA Tour. It has been as easy as -3 before. It's been as high as +2. But generally speaking, you're hovering in this -1. I would say that's probably a pretty good average. It's right in this -1, as 4 of the last 5 Travelers Championships have had a -1 cut line. Scoring, you have 19% birdies and only 14% bogeys, but you do have a little bit of a doubles bar here, and the Eagles are fairly non-existent except for maybe the short par 5 on the back 9. So again, it'll play a little bit easier to par than pure average, but it's still not easy by any means. So I don't feel comfortable using any scoring filter, easy to par or difficult to par this week, as we'll go into the historic conditions here in a little bit, and I'll show you why. But don't feel great about any scoring filters. Driving accuracy, again, per Pete Dye Designs, generally speaking, a lot of emphasis on accuracy. 68% or almost 69% driving accuracy here versus 61 and some change at the average tour event. And that would probably, or at least hopefully, lean you to the less in terms of the driving distance, and you would be correct. You don't even average 280 here. This is one of the shortest average driving distance courses on the PGA Tour. Green regulation percentage actually a little bit higher than the average tour event, even though these are smaller greens. That is helping to contribute a little bit to the slightly easier scoring, although it's not extremely easy. Scrambling, players are slightly scrambling at a higher percentage than the average tour event, so nothing that would signify that we need to look at scrambling in any way. 3 putts less than the average tour event. Again, smaller greens. Players are coming generally off of the U.S. Open, so they're coming off some lightning speed greens to greens that they're generally more comfortable with. We talked about the distance, proximity, again, with smaller greens and a very short course. Proximity is closer to the hole than the average tour event. 28 feet here versus 29 feet at the average tour event. So there's a look at TPC River Highlands from a scorecard and graphical view. All right, let's go ahead and move to back to the player page view. We know that we are on Bent and Poa Anna. I don't know why I clicked pure Bent. I didn't want to do that. Let's see. We need to. Oh, I've got the Pete Dye filter. That's why. All right, so let me unclick that. We are going to look at Bent and Poa Anna courses. So we are looking for Silverado. We are looking for Detroit Golf Club, which I just passed. So we want Detroit. We want Oakdale, which we just saw for the Canadian Open. Oakdale. And we want Silverado. Where's Silverado? There it is. So those 3 courses are the 3 courses that we know that have bent and Poa annua. When we looked for the Canadian Open, we were looking at Detroit Golf Club, Silverado, and TPC River Highlands is where we're at this week. So we don't want to include where we're at in what's called the peer data, or the other metric or other courses that are making up what we're wanting to look at. I'm going to have to expand the timeline to make sure we have enough rounds for everybody. We see 28 is the max for these 3 courses. And of course, Oakdale will only have 4 at most for players. So really we're looking at Detroit and Silverado. And of course, when we go to the tournament history tab and we go to the early look file, we'll really emphasize who's put well at TPC River Highlands. But just in terms of getting a feel for a ranking and whatnot, your top putters on bent and Poa annua greens, yeah, I guess I should probably go ahead and include TPC River Highlands now that I'm thinking about it. That way we just make sure we gather everything that we want to see. TPC River Highlands. Let's add that one. So 4 courses. Again, Silverado, the host of the Fortinet. Detroit Golf Club, which is the host of the Rocket Mortgage. TPC River Highlands, where we are this week for the Travelers. And in Oakdale, we just saw at the Canadian Open. Those 4 courses are the bent and Poa annua courses that we have on tour. I would say regularly. Oakdale's not a regular. The other 3 are. But Oakdale's recent enough that we want to include it. So, your top putters in the past 5 years on bent and Poa annua have been Tommy Fleetwood, Kevin Kisner, Harris English, Bryce Garnett, Zach Blair, Justin Lauer, Xander, Sahith Theegala, Adam Long, and Denny McCarthy. So there's a look at your top putters, and especially since we saw the heavy emphasis in the course breakdown on the putting, you want to put a star or asterisk these players to begin your week, as I imagine putting is going to have a pretty big weight in my mixed condition model, at least early on in my research is what I'm thinking. All right, a couple other things that we definitely want to look at. Let's go to the beginning of 2021, and we know this rough is long. GCSIA listed it at 4 inches plus in some places. So I don't know how much it's going to factor into the mixed condition model. But let's take a look at some around the green metrics when it's in long rough. These greens, even though they are easy to hit, they're not extremely easy to hit. These are small greens, so players are going to miss them from time to time. So your top around the green players in long rough since the beginning of 2021: Tommy Fleetwood, Danny Willett, Scotty Scheffler, Tony Finau, Ben Griffin, Matt Kuchar, Siwoo Kim, Cam Young, Matt Fitzpatrick, Kevin Streelman, and Kevin Kisner. So a few names overlapping already. Tommy Fleetwood has been on there for the putting and now for the around the green. Kevin Kisner has been up there several times now through some of these various filters and whatnot. All right, we're going to remove the long rough. Last thing we're going to take a look at in terms of statistics or in-depth statistics, let's just take a look at our top iron players this calendar year. So in the past 6 months plus, your top strokes gained approach players: Scotty Scheffler, John Rahm, Wyndham Clark, Colin Morikawa, Tony Finau, Xander, Ricky Fowler, Sepp Straka, Victor Holland, and Tom Hoge. All right, before we go to the tournament history of the strokes gained total tab, let's take a very quick look at the historic conditions. And you see the past 2 years, every single round has played to average. We do have a few easy rounds. We have a few difficult rounds, but most of the time it plays to average. And I don't like using the average scoring filter. I would much prefer to use the scoring filter if we know it's difficult, like the U.S. Open, or if we knew it was going to be easy, like the Byron Nelson. But with this being average, I'm not going to be using a scoring filter, and this kind of backs up what we saw in the course breakdown in terms of the difficulty, talking about the cut line, the individual holes. I think the furthest away from par absolute value is, I think, 2200th. So nothing really deviates from par a whole lot. We have a lot of holes here that are, say, a tenth under to a tenth over par, generally in scoring. Greens, at least the past couple of years, have been labeled as Poa annua per Fantasy National, but they were classified as bent beforehand. So that's why we wanted to look at these specific courses and the putters on those courses. Hitting fairways, easy to difficult, kind of all depends on wind conditions and the firmness of the course. One thing that we have always seen at the Travelers, the rough has always been long. I did not add any speed filter to the bent and Poa annua. They've been fast for the past 4 or 5 years or so, 6 even, but they were at times slow. Then they got to average. Now they are fast. I doubt they'll ever get to lightning, but the trend has been to increase the speed of these greens. But we will definitely be looking at bent and Poa annua. Might add the fast speed filter, green speed filter, if I feel comfortable with it. Of course, the course has always been short and is a Pete Dye design. So I wanted to make sure I gave you the tournament conditions, but not going to do anything with scoring filter, and a lot of that is to do with the fact that it generally plays to average. All right, let's move to the tournament history tab, the strokes gained total, and TPC River Highlands has hosted the Travelers all the way back to at least 2012. So there will be no need to, cut out years or anything like that. We can take a good full 5-year look at the players who have played well here. Your defending champion is Xander. His first solo win, solo strokes gained, or solo stroke play win on the PGA Tour in a long time. Broke a drought for him. He wins, and then he went and won the Scottish Open, his next tournament last year. So something to be mindful of. But your defending champion is Xander. 2021, Harris English, coming off of a very strong performance at the U.S. Open this year. Also something to keep in mind. Chez Reavie is a former champion of this event. 2020 was a live player. Trying to remember who that was. I know DJ has won this event. It might have been DJ in 2020. Bubba Watson has won this event. Jordan Spieth has won this event. So a wide variety of different types of players. Chez Reavie is never going to be very long off the tee. DJ, especially back when he won, whether it was 2020 or before, was a bomber. Xander, pretty good all-around game. Harris English is not a bomber. So a wide variety of different types of players have played well here at TPC River Highlands. And you see the highest strokes gained total player is Brian Harman. He is 4 for 5 in the past 5 years at making the cut here at TPC River Highlands. And when he's made the cut, it has been top 10s. 4 top 10s and a missed cut the past 5 years. Patrick Cantley, just 5 very, very solid performances. Nothing inside the top 10, but nothing outside the top 15. So just a very, very consistent force here at the Travelers. Chez Reavie, of course, the former champion back in 2019. He's 4 for 5 here. Other players, Xander, your defending champion. Kevin Strowman's played well here. Rory, 3 for 3. Jason Day's 4 for 5. Kevin Kisner popped on quite a few models. He's 3 for 4, but you see nothing worse than top 15 when he does make the cut. Scott Stallings, all or nothing. T6, T8, 2 missed cuts. Keegan's played fairly well here. So there's a list of the players who have played well here at TBC River Highlands and the Travelers. The other end of the spectrum, players who have not played this event well: Nick Watney, Michael Kim, Ryan Palmer, Cameron Champ 0 for 2, Doug Gim 1 for 3, Ricky, in fact, 0 for 2 the past 2 years here. Tom Hoagie 3 for 5, but 1 middling and 2 clunker of made cuts. JJ Spawn, pretty low in terms of strokes gained total here. Scrolling on down a little bit, a few more names here. Adam Shank, 0 for 5. Denny McCarthy, with all the emphasis on putting, he has not played well here. He's only 2 for 4. Bazadenhout, 0 for 1, was really bad last year. Again, another putter, Brian Gay, 0 for 3 in terms of performance at the Travelers. Russell Knox is a former champion, but you see he has not played well in recent events. So there's a look at your players who have not played the Travelers Championship very well in the past 5 years. With that, that's a good segue. We're going to move on over to Microsoft Excel. And we're going to start with the comparison course chart here. And as a reminder to returning viewers, or for your information as a new viewer, if you are, this is comparing the course to all of the other full field courses that are consistent on the PGA Tour. So you see, I don't include something like Oakdale or the Canadian because that course rotates. The US Open rotates. I also don't include the Masters. That's a limited field. I don't include the Century, a very limited field. So this is comparing the course that we are at for the week. This week, of course, the Travelers and TBC River Highlands against the full field course average. You see off the tee, we saw this in the course breakdown in Fantasy National. Off the tee, 14% more important. It has a little bit of weight here. The approach is a little bit mitigated. Still important, but it is mitigated. Now, surprisingly, the around the green, at least against other full field courses, is pretty heightened. I think this is a little bit misleading, as we saw that the strokes gained around the green were clearly the fourth most important shot, and it's going to be that way for every course. But I don't think around the green is as important as this is saying it is. I think it's going to be more so in the putting. But we definitely want to look at some off the tee metrics this week. We'll look at some around the green. That's why I did strokes gained around the green in long rough, just as a quick look. But we're going to have quite a bit of emphasis in putting, I believe, as putting is 10% more important here than the average full field course. Moving over into driving statistics and accuracy, you see distance doesn't really matter. 18% less important. Fairways, however, are 25% more important. Reconnection successful. So apologies if the stream cut out or paused there for a little bit. Not sure what the last thing was before it cut out. Distance doesn't matter. Fairways does. Greens a little bit, so we'll be interested to see tomorrow in the Data Dive prior leaderboards how it looks for this page view. Moving into the scoring, I don't foresee myself doing too much with the scoring. You see birdies and bogeys are pretty evenly split, which you would expect when scoring is generally average to difficulty on par. Par threes, again, we saw this. Even though this is a par 70, you would think the par fours and the par threes would carry a little bit more weight. Par threes really don't. not to the average full field course. Now, the specific length, if there is one, it's showing that it's the 150 to 175. So perhaps we'll take a longer look at that tomorrow. But at least in terms of your initial research going into tomorrow, doesn't look like par 3s have a whole lot of emphasis. Instead, it's these par 4s, because there are 12 of them. This is a par 70. There are 12 of them, 13.5% more important than the average full field course. Don't want to get too hung up on this humongous number here. Yes, there are 2 par 4s that measure 0 to 350, but the reason why I don't want to get too hung up, and I'm not going to put a whole lot of weight into this, not every course has a 0 to 350 or a drivable par 4. So this number is just outrageous because it's kind of an outlier in of itself. Par 4s are going to be important, and you see there are 8 par 4s from 400 to 450, 41.5% more important, just a huge emphasis. So I imagine this is going to be a significant portion of the mixed condition model. And it's going to be a heavy emphasis at the beginning of my research this week. Par 5s, again, there are only 2 of them, so I don't think they're going to have too much weight. You see, 18% less important. Not a big deal. Lastly, in terms of proximity, again, this is why I struggle with proximity, because the most common approach shot is 150 to 175. But you see, 12.5% less important. Prox total, not a big deal. So we'll go through the prior leaderboards tomorrow over the Data Dive show, figure out what proximity, if any, matters. But at least from an initial look, it doesn't look like proximity is going to be something we want to focus on. All right, to wrap up the show tonight, let's go to my early look file. Again, as a reminder to returning viewers, for your information if you're a new viewer, this is that same strokes gained total tab, the tournament history tab in Fantasy National, brought to Microsoft Excel, and the stats attributed for all the years that they've played across all of the various metrics. So you see someone like Adam Scott, in his 1 year that he played the Travelers in the past 5 years, he finished 13th. He lost 3.1 off the tee. He gained 3.3 in approach, etc. Patrick Cantley, we saw that he was a very consistent performer here. He's 5 for 5, 5 events, 0 missed cuts. He's averaged a 13th place finish in those 5 years. He's averaged 2.3 off the tee, 2.6 in approach, etc., etc. Interesting to see that he is the leading average finish player, even though the strokes gained total leader is Brian Harmon. He's getting hurt by the fact that he has that 1 missed cut. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove any player. This has been going on enough. I want to see the players who have played it consistently and recently, so at least 3 of the 5 years, what they have been performing well at. That's who we want to focus on this week for our outright wagers, placement wagers, and our early looks into DFS. So we see here, off the tee, I'll do anyone who's averaged a top 40. That is 14 players, at least for people who have played it at least 3 times. For players who have averaged a top 40, you got a 0.9 in off the tee. That's a fairly decent number. Rory's really carrying that weight there. But look at this approach. You have to come down to Kevin Kisner before you even find somebody who is negative. This is a 1.7, so almost doubling off the tee. Around the green, the 0.9, so actually the same as off the tee, even though we saw that the off the tee was outweighing around the green for your leaderboards, your top 10s, your top 5s, your top and your winners. For the players who have consistently played TPC River Highlands, around the green is a contributing factor. And then the putting, the 1.5. So it's not as high as the approach, You see all the very heavy green, 4.5 from Putnam, 3 from Xander, 3.2 Chez Reavie. But you have a lot of players here at the Travelers at TPC River Highlands, 1.5, 1.2, 1.5, 2, 1.8. So not as many spike performances, but very consistent performances for your players who have averaged the top 40. Moving into the driving, you see, Rory's got plenty of distance. Cantley's got plenty of distance, but it's not mandatory. Mark Hubbard, very, very low in the distance. Brendan Todd's never going to be a long hitter. He's never going to have positive driving distance. Andrew Putnam, never going to have positive driving distance. He's 3 for 3 here. Ryan Armour, distance is not mandatory. It can help. Bombers aren't prohibited from winning here, but you don't need it. You absolutely don't need it. In fact, the average is negative for the top 40. Instead, we saw that fairways was the big one of the bigger things. 24%, I think it was. This is a 1.8, but the greens is a 2.6. So at least for your players who have played TPC River Highlands at an elite level year after year, it's greens in regulation gained. So take that for what you will. Like Seamus has a pretty horrendous number here in the fairways, so he's hurting that number. You have some pretty big performances, but again, Brendan Todd, 9.0, that's his game. He has to hit fairways. Ryan Armour, much the same because they don't have distance. Scoring, interesting to see this little bit here. Looks like it's more so in the birdies. 2.3, 1.8. So a little bit into the birdies. Heavy birdies there and there. A little bit here. Dead even. Birdies, slight birdies. Yeah. So majority of your top 40 players are favoring the birdies gained. But again, it's close enough that I don't think there's going to be a lot of emphasis either in birdies gained or bogeys avoided. Might be looking at opportunities. Perhaps opportunities on Pete Dye courses. Opportunities on short courses could also be something we might want to look at. Be interesting to see as I do my research tomorrow and Tuesday, go through the leaderboards tomorrow night with you all, how that shakes out. Par 3s, 4s, and 5s, we saw the 3s really kind of didn't matter. Like, these players are playing them okay, but nothing outstanding except for maybe Xander. This is a 0.8. The par 4s, 0.8, surprisingly. Oh, I'm sorry. No, those are the par 5s. So the par 5s and the par 3s are exactly the same for your top players who have averaged the top 40. 0.8, 0.8, which means the par 4s, and you see this heavy emphasis of green, 3.5, almost 4 times the importance in terms of par 3s and par 5s. In fact, you don't see a negative in terms of par 4 performance here at TPC River Highlands until you scroll down. Now, you'd have an even from Robert Shreb, sure, but he's still not negative. Your first negative in terms of performance specifically at TPC River Highlands is from Joseph Bramlett all the way down here. Par 4's going to be heavyweight this week, and especially in these 400 to 450. Now, Seamus Power has not played that length well, but you see everyone else in the top, I'll say the top 40, but players who have averaged the top 40, everybody else has played them pretty darn well. So a big factor. Par 5s, hit and miss. Rory and Cantley have taken advantage of them. Hubbard and Xander haven't played them well, and Xander's your defending champion, so pretty hit and miss. And then lastly, in terms of proximity, again, specifically here at TPC River Highlands, I don't see anything that stands out. Especially like this 150 to 175. You've got some really good performances, sure. Andrew Putnam, Streelman, Rory, but you got some poor performances from players who have played this event well. Seamus, Mark Hubbard, Kevin Kisner, Mac Hughes. So be interested to see what it's like going through the specific prior leaderboards tomorrow. There's a look at the players who have performed the best consistently year over year at TPC River Highlands, what they've been playing well. That's going to do it for the initial research show this evening. Thanks to Joey for jumping in the chat. We really appreciate it. If you were successful this past week at the U.S. Open, let me know, either in the comments or reach out to me on social media. Want to be able to shout out members of the community who have success. The big shout out this week is to my friend Dave, who had the top 10 on Harris English. I had a few close calls, especially on a parlay. Didn't come through. My DFS was lackluster. I can't say it was a disaster. I had a few things right. I was very high on Xander. He played well. I was pretty high on Harris English. I mentioned him last Wednesday evening. He plays very, very well. Was using a little bit of Wyndham Clark, but I had enough incorrect, as in Adam Scott over Ricky Fowler, not using Terrell Hatton. Hideki didn't play. Hideki played well except for today. Fitzpatrick was pretty mediocre, so enough didn't go my way to where it was an unsuccessful week, but I can't call it a disaster. I do feel like I was on the right track a little bit. So hopefully you had some success for the U.S. Open, and happy Father's Day again to all the dads out there. Hope you had a very good Sunday. For all of the wagers you made this past week for the U.S. Open, for all of the DFS contests you entered this past week for the U.S. Open. And until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.